Claude Fable 5 launched last month, and 3 days later, the US government took it offline because of an export control issue. This week it's back, except it's only included in your subscription until next week. I mean, the story around this model literally changes by the day. But who has time to keep up with half the internet just to know what's going on? So this is where a Firecrawl monitor comes in. It's an endpoint that watches any page on the web and notifies you as soon as something changes. How does it work? And is it able to search the entire internet instead of a single page? Well, hit subscribe and let's find out. Let's start by setting the record straight. Fable 5 is the best coding model I have ever used. I mean, I've been able to one-shot some amazing projects with it, and the code it produces is as good, or maybe even better than what I would have written by hand. It's expensive at $50 per million output tokens, so twice the amount of Opus, but it is available as part of your Claude subscription, at least at the time of recording, which is the problem. Everything about Fable is based on time. Its access, its limits, whether you can use it in your subscription or not, and news about Fable moves very fast. But it's not even just Fable. Any AI model, any framework, any new agent harness feature can be big news overnight. So how do you keep up without scrolling multiple websites every minute? Well, you can get a Firecrawl monitor to do that for you, which works by scraping a page on a schedule that you set, then compares the current scrape with the previous one and notifies you if there's a difference. But you most likely don't want a notification on every single little change. So you can give it a prompt and an AI judge will go through the differences to check if any of them match the prompt you said and only notify you if there's any meaningful change. And this whole process works incredibly well. In fact, let's go through a quick demo. Although it's possible to create a Firecrawl monitor using the MCP server, the CLI, and even directly in the Firecrawl dashboard, for this example, we're going to be creating one in code using the SDK just to explain how all the flags and different options work. So imagine if I wanted to keep track of new releases in this repo, which is a CLI for Camtasia. I promise I'll loop this back to Fable later on. But to do that with a Firecrawl monitor, I'd first have to set up the Node SDK, which you can do with or without an API key, and then I'd run the create monitor function. As you can imagine, there are other monitor-related functions like listing, updating, and deleting monitors, but for now we'll focus on this one. Now from here, there are 3 required inputs: name, schedule, and targets. Name is self-explanatory. Schedule is how often you want the monitor to run, which can be set with cron syntax or with text using natural language. Then there's targets, which are things you want to monitor. Although you could target multiple things in this monitor, it's best to have one monitor per concern. Now here we have a target with a type of scrape, and we've set the URL that we want to scrape every 5 minutes. Note, if you're familiar with scraping in Firecrawl, you can also set scrape options, so things like format, which could be HTML, summary, markdown, things like that. Or you can set a format of JSON with its own schema. Then after the mandatory values, we have some optional ones like goal and webhook. So goal tells Firecrawl's AI judge exactly what a meaningful change is to me, which in this case is to notify me whenever a new release is published. And webhook tells Firecrawl where to post notifications whenever there's a change. But you could also create an email notification, which looks like this whenever you get a meaningful change. So now if we run this file, we can see we get the monitor ID. And if you have the Firecrawl CLI installed, you can view monitors with monitor list, which I'm piping with JQ, and this will give me information about the monitor that was just created. But we can also view the monitor in the Firecrawl dashboard. So let's see this monitor in action. So I've created a basic webhook server with Bun, which is running on port 3000. And so I don't have to deploy it, I'm going to run it in a Tailscale funnel. Now I can test my monitor by making a curl request to the webhook. And we can see it's picked it up, showing no major or meaningful differences. And it's done the same in the Firecrawl UI. So now let's get it to pick up something meaningful. If we change the version of CamKit, we can see it's picked up on the change, noted it as meaningful, and even shows us the difference. So we can see the old version and the new version that it's been changed to. And we can do some pretty cool things with this information. For example, I have this fake course site that teaches people how to use CamKit. And it contains the latest CamKit version over here, but I don't want to have to manually change the version each time a new one comes out. So we can update the webhook server to check for meaningful changes, check for differences in versions of those changes, and then update the site to the latest version whenever a new one is deployed. So again, if we update the version and then keep an eye on the website, the version number should automatically update whenever our Firecrawl monitor runs. And just like that, without me even refreshing the page, we can see the number has changed. And one thing to note is that there was another run before that, but the AI judge didn't mark it as meaningful, and so I wasn't notified. How does this all relate to Fable 5? Well, what if I wanted to know as soon as someone published some new information about it using a Firecrawl monitor? There's no one URL giving me everything about Fable, but you can still use a monitor. Instead of having a type of scrape, you can change the type from scrape to search and provide search queries instead of the URL with a search window to show results published within this time frame. So now with that monitor running, I get notified whenever there's a meaningful article about Fable 5, which I can do anything with, like use it to update the news section in my Fable 5 fan site. Yes, I did create a website just to keep track of Fable news. But anyway, that's a quick overview of the Firecrawl monitor feature, one endpoint to keep track of a single page, a whole website, or the entire web. If, like me, you want to keep track of all the Fable 5 news, then you can visit this website. And if you do choose to sign up to Firecrawl, you can use this code to get 500 extra credits. Finally, check out the next video if you want to learn how I used Firecrawl to teach me about loop engineering and build my first few loops.